Have you ever stood on the brink, feeling your heart race as you faced a critical moment, a single decision that could change everything? Imagine yourself at the crossroads, where ancient wisdom and modern life collide, and the stakes couldn't be higher. In this captivating next part, you'll witness a profound turning point, where the Stoic mindset and samurai-inspired resolve aren't just theories in a book, but lifelines in a real-world drama. Whether you're struggling with social anxiety, caught up in the endless grind, or desperately craving authenticity, this is the moment that could rewrite your story forever. But the most powerful secret, the final twist, comes at the very end. Keep watching until the credits roll to discover your own path to freedom. And if you resonate with these powerful life philosophies, hit that subscribe button and join our community where timeless wisdom meets modern-day struggles. In the winding tapestry of human experience, there is a deep-seated desire for self-actualization that often collides head-on with the weight of societal pressures. We find ourselves pulled in multiple directions, sometimes urged to please those around us, sometimes pressed to chase a dream that shimmers tantalizingly on the horizon. This interplay between personal aspiration and community expectation is universal. We yearn for connection and approval, yet we also crave the freedom to forge our own path. It is within this tension that various philosophical frameworks, refined over centuries, offer us guidance. Two compelling influences stand out in particular: the pragmatic resilience championed by the Stoics and the unwavering discipline articulated by the legendary samurai Miyamoto. Their combined wisdom illustrates how one might live a life of deep integrity, forging an authentic route toward fulfilling the so-called dream life, while understanding the concessions that such freedom inevitably demands. From one angle, Stoicism provides a thorough inquiry into what it means to respond rationally to the unpredictable world we inhabit. Ancient Stoic thinkers, most famously Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, teach that we should focus our mental and emotional energy on those elements we can genuinely control: our actions, our choices, and our attitudes. Meanwhile, we are to remain composed, even detached, from those externalities outside our grasp. Societal approval, the opinions of peers, changes in fortune, these phenomena, say the Stoics, must not dictate our inner well-being. Epictetus famously proclaimed that while external events are largely beyond our direct influence, our judgment about them is entirely ours to govern. In modern life, where social media pressures and workplace evaluations become daily concerns, this classical idea of distinguishing between what we can and cannot control can serve as a liberation from ceaseless self-doubt. On the other side of the philosophical spectrum, we find Miyamoto Musashi, a man who lived in 17th century Japan and was celebrated as much for his wisdom as for his unmatched swordsmanship. Shortly before his death, Musashi composed a short work referred to as the Dokodo, or the Way of Walking Alone, which contained 21 precepts guiding the reader towards self-reliance, detachment from empty pursuits, and loyalty to one's own internal compass. Although the context of his era differs dramatically from ours, Musashi's enduring themes, caution against clinging to possessions, avoidance of needless jealousy, and the cultivation of acceptance, resonate across cultural and historical boundaries. Through these precepts, he calls upon individuals to cultivate a disciplined solitude, an inner ethos grounded in unwavering self-respect and clarity of purpose. In so doing, one might transcend societal traps, choosing to stand firmly on values rather than shifting for external approval. What ties Stoicism and Musashi's approach together is a recognition of the steep price that authenticity sometimes exacts. Living one's dream life, by definition, requires a confrontation with norms, judgments, and personal limitations. The Stoic notion of selective indifference helps us identify the trivialities in life that often siphon off mental energy, like pandering to gossip or social media applause. Musashi's emphasis on minimalism and unbreakable integrity goes a step further, reminding us that even the smallest habits of self-betrayal or attachment to ephemeral pleasures can eventually derail our higher aspirations. Such teachings caution that too many of us chase fleeting validations, wealth, fame, the approval of others, while missing the deep contentment that arises from a life steered by self-awareness and principle. Taken together, these two wisdom traditions frame a potent roadmap toward self-mastery. They invite us to examine the ways we might sabotage ourselves through an overabundance of niceness, a crippling fear of being judged, or a reluctance to step outside comfort zones. Over-niceness, while superficially lauded in modern society, can yield resentment, burnout, or existential malaise, because it often denies us the dignity of expressing our genuine feeling. Fearing what others might think, in turn, erodes our sense of possibility and can confine us to a life of bland conformity. Yet when we blend Musashi's insistence on disciplined authenticity with the Stoic injunction to remain tranquil in the face of external flux, we find both the courage and the methodology to pursue an existence that is truly ours. Before diving deeply into Stoicism and Musashi's teachings, it is worth reflecting on how deeply ingrained the worry of others' opinions can be. We encounter it from childhood, a fear of standing out, a yearning to be accepted by peers, and a conditioning to be nice at all costs. It is common to value niceness to such an extreme that it becomes a veneer, a performance we give to avoid tension. This performance often chips away at our capacity for self-expression, ironically eroding our most genuine point of connection with others, our honest thoughts, feelings, and intentions. In professional and personal contexts alike, over-niceness can lead us to accept burdens that exceed our capacity, stifle our creativity, and even undermine our mental health. What is the distinction, then, between healthy kindness and over-niceness? Healthy kindness arises from empathy. It is a benevolent approach to life in which caring about people is voluntary and purposeful, not coerced by fear or manipulated by external demands. Over-niceness, on the other hand, is often rooted in anxiety, specifically anxiety about not being liked, not fitting in, or incurring disapproval. It can manifest in ways that impoverish the self, never saying no even when one's limits are reached, turning a blind eye to personal needs, or concealing genuine opinions to maintain a pleasant facade. This phenomenon was described by philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre as a mode of bad faith, wherein one denies authentic selfhood in favor of a prescribed social role. In more contemporary psychological parlance, it can be seen as an unhealthy people-pleasing or codependent. The ramifications of over-niceness are multifaceted. On the surface, an overly nice person is likely to be praised as cooperative, agreeable, and well-liked. Underneath that surface is often stress, resentment, or a sense of identity confusion. When personal boundaries go unrecognized or are frequently overrun, bitterness can accumulate. Resentment might be directed at those who continually depend on the nice person, yet at the same time, the overly nice individual may blame themselves for failing to stand up or articulate a boundary. Over long periods, this dynamic fosters an existential tension in which outward compliance contradicts an inner sense of frustration. Stoicism offers a compelling antidote to this internal discord. By emphasizing what the philosopher Epictetus called the art of acquiescing in the inevitable, the Stoic approach teaches that external judgments are fleeting and largely beyond our direct control. Rather than devoting energy to pleasing others, the Stoic stance suggests devoting our energy to living with integrity. This means speaking truthfully, maintaining moral clarity, and practicing rational discernment about how we spend our time and resources. Being truly kind, in a Stoic sense, means acting with virtue. extending genuine help while respecting both our own autonomy and that of others. In parallel, Musashi's emphasis on solitary practice and the concept of minimal attachments also cautions us to avoid trivial pursuits, such as the pursuit of universal approval, that might sabotage our dedication to living well. Between these two philosophical standpoints, a shared message emerges. Niceness can be beneficial if it stems from authentic compassion, but it becomes detrimental if it is used as armor to hide our real selves. Discarding excessive concern about others' opinions is not about becoming uncaring or cruel. Rather, it is about grounding ourselves in a set of core values and refusing to be tossed about by every passing breeze of external validation or criticism. In this sense, Stoic emotional regulation and samurai discipline converge, reminding us that if we wish to truly live our dreams, we must be prepared to find wholeness in ourselves, rather than in the ever-shifting acceptance of those around us. Yet, what does it concretely look like to walk the path of Stoic calm, or Musashi's way of walking alone? To illustrate this, it is helpful to examine practical scenarios. Take, for instance, someone who regularly declines dream opportunities, perhaps launching a creative project, attempting a career pivot, or even traveling to a place of personal significance for fear of social judgment or condemnation. They might worry that if they fail, their peers will see them as incompetent, or if they succeed, they might face envy or criticism. Ironically, whether success or failure, the worry about others' thoughts can be crippling. This mental blockade, quietly reinforced by social norms, keeps countless individuals in a state of safe dissatisfaction, never venturing too far outside the lines. Consider the fictional example of Emily, a talented artist who denies her true style to produce work that suits the expectations of her conservative local art scene. She starts to feel hollow, as though her creative spirit is suffocating. When she is exposed to the fearless creativity of a newcomer who cares little for conservative tastes, she sees that while some people criticized the newcomer's art, many others admired its originality. The newcomer was not enslaved by the judgments of the crowd and in fact found deeper fulfillment in authenticity. In Emily's subsequent journey, she chooses to experiment with her real artistic passions. While criticism still exists, she learns that being true to herself cultivates a sense of liberation and fosters deeper connections with those who genuinely appreciate her distinctive voice. These types of narratives align closely with Stoic teachings. Stoicism would encourage Emily to ask whether she can control how audiences or critics perceive her artwork. The answer? No, she cannot control the perceptions of others, but she can control the care, intention, and craftsmanship she brings to her work. From this vantage point, any negative review would no longer be an attack on her personal worth, but merely someone else's external viewpoint, ephemeral and beyond her direct influence. Similarly, Musashi's principle, "accept everything just the way it is," urges a recognition that circumstances unfold as they do. While we cannot reshape every aspect of our environment, we can discipline ourselves to respond with composure, clarity, and unwavering dedication to our chosen path. To glean the full benefit of these teachings, we must also consider the role of internal motivation. The Stoic emphasis on virtue teaches that personal growth and moral excellence should be enough to sustain us, rather than the pursuit of fleeting praise. Meanwhile, the samurai conviction underscores that discipline, showing up each day for solitary practice, whether swordsmanship in Musashi's context or the creative arts in Emily's, sharpens one's senses and fosters resilience. Both traditions thereby highlight that meaning, purpose, and the true measure of success lie in internal factors, not external applause. It is a concept easy to appreciate intellectually, yet profoundly challenging to embody when the noise of society demands compliance, compliments, or a sugar-coated version of ourselves. Overcoming that challenge is in many ways the essence of living one's dream life. When we finally break free from being too nice or too fearful, doors open. Not all of those doors lead to comfort. Some lead to criticism, failure, or personal risk. But they open onto landscapes of potential where genuine self-expression is possible. Accepting that this is the price for a more fulfilling life is the first step toward forging a path unencumbered by self-imposed limits. In parallel with the Stoic and Samurai emphasis on personal authenticity, there emerges a second concern: how to ensure that this quest for freedom does not devolve into self-centeredness or disregard for others. Neither Stoicism nor Musashi's code encourages us to treat people poorly or to run from our societal responsibility. On the contrary, the deeper message is that authentic kindness, an approach that is neither performative nor fueled by subconscious anxieties, often leads to healthier, more balanced relationships. A well-boundaried individual, after all, is far more capable of giving genuine support than someone who passively accumulates resentments from always saying yes when they mean no. To illustrate this dynamic, we can look at another fictional composite, Alex, a high-performing high school student who thrived on praise from teachers, peers, and coaches. Whenever his accomplishments faltered, his self-esteem crashed. The dissonance, triggered from one missed basketball shot or a grade below an A, consumed him, for he feared losing the approval he had grown to rely upon. However, when a series of injuries impeded him from performing at his top level, he was forced to reevaluate the foundation of his identity. In counseling, Alex discovered that his sense of self had always been held captive by external accolades. The mental shift that followed, recognizing his inherent worth beyond grades or sports achievements, introduced an unshakable sense of inner dignity. As soon as he disconnected his self-esteem from external scoring, he found he could engage more meaningfully in both studies and athletics, ironically excelling more once the fear of failure receded. This principle resonates with Stoicism's message about focusing on what is truly within our power. Should Alex continue to tie his self-value to a scoreboard that others define, he would constantly oscillate between pride and despair. By centering on personal growth, effort, virtue, a learning mindset, he gained a steadier source of self-respect. Similarly, in Musashi's teachings, there is an admonition not to fixate on possessions or even on personal glory. True confidence, for Musashi, arises from mastery of self, from disciplined action that is unwavering in the face of external judgments. By relinquishing the chase for everyone's approval, one ironically finds more peace and becomes far less susceptible to manipulation or exploitation. Stepping away from the illusions of external validation also sets the stage for deeper connections with others. A person who knows their worth independently of other people's opinions can offer kindness not out of desperation for approval, but from genuine goodwill. Such individuals become more resilient in navigating social complexities. They may still face misunderstandings or critiques, yet these no longer define or derail them. Instead, they preserve the emotional and mental bandwidth to show empathy and support where it is genuinely needed. This approach to life fosters what we might call eudaimonic generosity, a philanthropic inclination emerging from inner abundance rather than from fragile attempts to appear indispensable. Importantly, forging this approach does not mean shutting down negative emotions or becoming impervious to feedback. Rather, it implies a skillful discernment between constructive criticism, which can catalyze our self-improvement, and destructive criticism, which serves only to demean or control. By staying anchored in self-acknowledgement and clarity of purpose, we can parse which kind of feedback to welcome and integrate, and which to release without tormenting ourselves. In short, transcending worry over others' perceptions frees us to live with more robust kindness, deeper integrity, and a steadfast sense of personal responsibility. Moving further along the journey of internalizing Stoic and samurai wisdom, it becomes important to discuss practical methods and exercises that anchor these philosophies in daily life. Reflection practices, for example, are a cornerstone of both traditions. Marcus Aurelius's meditations were essentially personal journal entries where he reminded himself of the impermanence of worldly praise and the imperative to act with virtue. By daily reflection, writing down incidents, analyzing emotional reactions, and reaffirming moral principles, one can keep clarity amidst the turbulence of human affairs. This routine fosters an intimate familiarity with one's own mental landscape, thus illuminating hidden fears or aspirations that might otherwise remain tangled in subconscious guesswork. From the samurai side, Musashi's routine was shaped by disciplined solitude, including intense training in swordsmanship, but also painting, calligraphy, and strategic thinking. Modern parallels might include the practice of mindfulness meditation, creative journaling, or quiet, focused time that fosters personal insight. Rather than seeing solitude as loneliness, we learn to see it as a practice field for internal fortitude. Even a quick daily mindfulness session can bring awareness to the swirl of anxieties concerning how we are perceived. This awareness can then be directed to the Stoic principle of focusing on what is within our power: breath, posture, emotional orientation, while letting go of external noise. Philosophically, these practices tie in with the notion of momentum mori, remember you must die, a concept championed by the Stoics. Engaging in momentary reflection on mortality is not intended to depress or terrify, but to underscore how fleeting external validations and opinions truly are. When we recall how short our time is, it becomes easier to sift through what truly matters and to choose authenticity over ephemeral flattery. Musashi's counsel to be detached from desire for one's entire life resonates on a similar frequency. While one does not have to live ascetically or give up all pleasure, a wise measure of detachment from desires helps prevent over-dependence on them for self-worth. Additionally, a mental exercise that Stoics recommend is premeditation of adversity, wherein one visualizes possible setbacks or criticisms before they happen. The idea is not to become pessimistic, but to mentally rehearse a calm and rational response. So if you fear public speaking because of what people might think, you imagine a scenario where you stumble over your words, face disinterested expressions, and still choose to remain composed and clear. Epictetus would emphasize that you cannot command audience reactions, but you can govern your own mind. By practicing adversity in thought, you become more prepared when it occurs in reality. These daily or weekly disciplines, while seemingly small, can accumulate into a profound shift. Over time, individuals who apply these philosophies often observe that their fear of judgment subsides, their willingness to explore new frontiers in personal or professional life expands, and their relationships evolve toward richer honesty. The changes might begin subtly, feeling less need to over-justify oneself in conversation, or noticing that critical remarks from peers no longer ignite a storm of self-doubt. Gradually, the entire orientation of one's life tilts toward greater peace, resilience, and alignment with authentic values. To further illuminate the human dimension of these concepts, it is helpful to consider examples of individuals who've implemented them in realistic settings. We've already introduced Emily, but let's also recall Maya, a driven graphic designer whose sense of worth often hinged on client praise. In a modern corporate environment, Maya found that each wave of approval lifted her spirits, while one biting critique or canceled project could send her into a spiral of self-questioning. This pattern of emotional reactivity was profoundly draining, leading her to an ever-present undercurrent of anxiety. Productivity suffered, and she became hesitant to pitch innovative ideas, fearing the sting of unfavorable opinions. However, upon discovering basic Buddhist principles about ego and attachment, which dovetail with the Stoic emphasis on impermanence, Maya realized that others' judgments were temporary phenomena. People's praises or criticisms passed like clouds in the sky. Deep within, she held an intrinsic worth that was not diminished by a negative comment. Embracing a brief daily meditation practice, she trained herself to notice negative self-talk as it arose. Rather than identify with it, she started to label it as a passing worry. Over time, these repeated acts of mindful detachment allowed her to remain centered regardless of external assessments. This internal stability awakened new heights of creativity. No longer shackled by the constant dread of being judged, she pitched bolder ideas. Ironically, the more authentic she became, the more her work resonated with certain forward-thinking clients. Sarah, on the other hand, offers a narrative about confronting a fear of conflict in a team-based environment. She possessed groundbreaking proposals in her workplace but often silenced herself, believing that vocalizing an unconventional direction might draw ire or conflict. In group meetings, she nodded along, rarely raising concerns or championing her unique viewpoints. Over time, she felt invisible, overshadowed by those who had fewer inhibitions about stirring the proverbial pot. However, after reading about Friedrich Nietzsche's perspective on self-overcoming and about how adversity can act as a forge for inner strength, she decided to experiment. In one pivotal team session, she calmly yet firmly presented her idea, fully anticipating that some might reject it. The initial debate was intense, but Sarah discovered that the sky did not fall. A few colleagues were critical, yet others were intrigued. Even more crucially, Sarah felt a rush of liberation by shedding the fear of external condemnation. It opened new avenues of creativity and collaboration because she felt freer to speak out, trust her instincts, and see conflict not as a personal attack, but as an opportunity to refine ideas. These examples tie directly back to the central philosophy. We hamper ourselves to a painful degree when we attach our sense of identity and worth to external judgments. Conversely, when we learn to let the judgments come and go like waves that do not drown us but simply pass by, our capacity for boldness and resilience expands. Of course, this transformation does not eradicate all difficulties or emotional triggers. We remain human, subject to doubts and occasionally stung by criticism. Yet with each reaffirmation of our capacity for self-definition, we loosen the chains of fear that hold us back from living a fuller, more impactful life. This first section has woven together the fundamental principles of Stoicism, Musashi's unwavering discipline, and real-life narratives demonstrating both the pitfalls of caring excessively about external judgments and the liberating effect of letting such cares go. The unifying thread is clear. Genuine fulfillment arises when we align our internal compass, our values, beliefs, and sense of purpose, with our outward actions. Stoicism underscores that the illusions of control we seek externally only deepen our distress, while the real seat of control lies in our thoughts, choices, and moral stance. Musashi advocates a clarity of mind unburdened by worldly entanglements, calling on each of us to weigh carefully where we invest our energy and what attachments might be diluting our focus on what truly matters. Alongside these classical teachings stand contemporary illustrations of the overly nice person, whose fear of non-acceptance results in compromised authenticity. By conflating niceness with moral worth, we too easily slip into a pattern of performative acquiescence that drains us from within. When that pattern cracks, perhaps under the weight of accumulated resentments or in the face of a courageous example from someone who has chosen self-honesty over people-pleasing, a valuable revelation ensues. It is not just possible but often deeply beneficial to set personal boundaries and to stand firmly in one's truth. Rather than fracturing relationships, healthy boundaries can bring them into more balanced alignment. Rather than fueling hostility, a measured willingness to say no fosters respect. People might be momentarily surprised by the shift, but in the long run, relationships typically develop deeper authenticity. In a world obsessed with validation, it can feel radical to assert that your worth and peace of mind do not hinge on external applause. Yet time and again, both ancient wisdom and modern case studies indicate that anchoring one's happiness in transitory externalities is precarious. When we derive fulfillment from our own integrity, we create an inner fortress that remains standing whether we encounter failure or success. This fortress does not imply arrogance or isolation. Rather, it fosters a quiet confidence that allows true kindness, genuine connection, and resilience to flourish. Though ancient, these teachings are more pertinent than ever in an era dominated by digital scrutiny and an endless barrage of social metrics. As we wrap up Part 1, we hold in mind the big question: what are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of living in accordance with our authentic vision? Perhaps we sacrifice illusions of universal adoration, the fleeting comfort of social acceptance, or the short-term gratification that comes from blending in. But in letting go of such illusions, we stand to gain much more: clarity of self, deeper creativity, the ability to weather the storms of negative feedback without losing our grounding, and above all, a sense of living in alignment with our core beliefs. This intangible peace is precisely what Stoic philosophers and the Samurai Code have cherished for centuries. The sense that our inner world is not up for negotiation, no matter how loud the external world becomes. Transitioning into the second section, it becomes vital to delve into the specific philosophical cores: Stoicism's major tenets, Musashi's 21 precepts, and how these frameworks parallel each other, each offering ways to navigate the tension between authenticity and external expectations. Stoicism, originating in ancient Greece and finding its strongest expression in Roman thinkers, is built on the insight that we cause ourselves unnecessary suffering by demanding that reality conform to our desires. The key lies in understanding that, while we can refine our responses to life, we rarely control the outcomes themselves. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal notes, later published as the Meditations, continually returned to the notion of ephemeral events. He recognized that fame and reproach, victory and defeat, are fleeting conditions that can only harm us if we attach our sense of identity to them. For Epictetus, freedom was not something granted by society, but rather a personal mastery over one's mind. He hammered home the idea that it is not events, but our judgments about events that cause us turmoil. So if others judge you, that is their event, not yours. You can remain equanimous by declining to internalize that judgment. This line of thought offers a direct remedy to the anxieties that arise from incessantly caring about others' opinions. Rather than fight external negativity or scramble to appease it, you opt to pivot your perspective inward, focusing on your own integrity. The question ceases to be, "How do they perceive me?" and transforms into, "Am I acting in accordance with virtue and reason?" That shift liberates mental energy for creative thinking, self-improvement, and forging authentic bonds, those built on real respect rather than an exchange of pleasantries. Meanwhile, Musashi's 21 precepts, also known as the Dokudo, are brief yet potent principles that, collectively, champion self-discipline and a sober acceptance of life's contingencies. A few of these precepts stand out for our purposes. For example, accept everything just the way it is echoes the Stoic notion of not resenting reality for falling short of our expectations. Never be jealous can be understood as a call to be impervious to social envy, thus maintaining one's focus on personal mastery rather than being derailed by others' fortunes or misfortunes. Another precept, do not pursue the taste of good food, highlights the idea that chasing external pleasures can lead to perpetual dissatisfaction, an idea reminiscent of how Stoics caution against seeking external validations for self-worth. In Musashi's worldview, the way of walking alone was more than an eccentric set of rules. It was, in essence, a distillation of a life spent honing skill, understanding mortality, and transcending ephemeral attachments. Just as the Stoics wrote from positions of leadership and adversity, Musashi's war-torn environment informed his stark perspective on life's fragility. Each day might be the last, so one must live deliberately, neither too dependent on others' accolades nor too fearful of others' condemnation. These illusions, whether of fame or shame, distract from the sword fighter's most pressing concern, readiness for any eventuality. In combining these vantage points, we get a cohesive message. You are not obligated to chain your self-esteem to others' fleeting perceptions. Instead, you can anchor your sense of self in those disciplines, intellectual, artistic, or moral, that you have cultivated from within. That anchor, once set, frees you to experiment, create, love, and even fail without disintegrating. By internalizing these guiding lights, we discover that we can be both kind and firm, both caring and self-possessed, stepping away from people-pleasing as a survival tactic and toward authenticity as a way of being. One of the critical intersections between the Stoic approach and Musashi's code is how each philosophy conceptualizes attachments, particularly attachments to material objects, social accolades, or even strong emotional states. Stoicism teaches a rigorous process of distinguishing between what is up to us and what is not up to us. Material wealth, reputation, and external events fall into the second category. Hence, Stoics admonish us not to become entangled in anxiety over losing what was never truly within our full command. Musashi similarly warns against amassing possessions beyond what is essential and cautions practitioners not to fixate on collecting objects like advanced weaponry unless they serve a clear purpose. Both stances view hyper-attachment as an avenue to fear, conflict, and distraction. From a psychological standpoint, the problem arises when our identity or well-being becomes too closely enmeshed with external factors. Suppose an individual invests all their self-worth in their job title. If a corporate restructuring strips away that title, their sense of self can collapse. By contrast, if we see the job as merely a context within which we practice virtue, diligence, or creativity, then job loss, though inconvenient, need not be existentially shattering. We remain anchored in qualities that cannot be taken from us: our internal character, skill sets, and moral convictions. Musashi's principle, "do not hold on to possessions you no longer need," underscores the freedom found in traveling light, both literally and metaphorically. Beyond the realm of objects, this statement can also mean shedding old emotional baggage, outdated dreams that no longer serve our real goals, or even relationships that have become parasitic rather than nurturing. It takes courage to release attachments, particularly in a society that glorifies accumulation of status, objects, achievements. Yet that very release often paves the way for more sincere forms of happiness and creativity. Applied to our modern question of caring excessively about what others think, the same logic applies. The need for universal acceptance can quickly become an emotional possession that weighs us down. Once we identify it as superfluous to our genuine growth, letting it go yields immense relief. In practice, how might we begin letting go of these attachments? Methods vary, but mindful meditation or journaling is a strong starting point. Through conscious reflection, you might realize how much energy you waste daydreaming about the next purchase, the next compliment, or the next wave of external praise. Write those cravings down. Examine them under the lens of impermanence. If I gain this, how long will the joy last? If I lose it, how devastating is it truly? This reflection can peel back layers of illusion, revealing that many of our so-called needs are illusions we've been taught to chase. From there, as one detaches from superficial wants, a kind of mental spaciousness opens. This new mental space allows you to pivot focus onto the intangible qualities that matter: integrity, relationships built on respect, creative pursuits aligned with your personal sense of mission. Both Stoicism and Musashi's Code also highlight that releasing these attachments does not mean retreating into cold indifference or ascetic isolation. Quite the contrary. Freed from the shackles of superficial cravings, you are more present for genuine interactions, more open to constructive forms of compassion, and more likely to engage fully in life's offerings. Authentic generosity and warmth flourish best when unencumbered by anxious overinvestment in outcomes. Thus, ironically, by caring less about ephemeral validations, you create the conditions for a deeper, more meaningful form of caring, one guided by principle, not by dread of disapproval. Beyond attachments to possessions or external validation, another domain explored by both Stoicism and Musashi's teachings is the management of emotions like lust, jealousy, and resentment. In Musashi's Dokudo, principles like never be jealous or resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for oneself nor others, call for an emotional composure that might seem austere at first glance. Yet these dictates speak directly to the turmoil that arises when we let envy or grudges govern our interactions. Stoics, similarly, counsel that we should not let reactive emotions disrupt the steadiness of our rational faculties. For them, a lapse into jealousy or resentment implies that we have, in some measure, ceded our internal serenity to forces outside our control. Consider the scenario of envy. In professional environments, envy can corrode team spirit and personal well-being. If you constantly measure yourself against colleagues, sizing up who receives the most praise or the biggest raise, you risk losing sight of your own growth. Stoicism would remind us that a colleague's success lies fully outside our sphere of control. It belongs to their efforts, their luck, and external circumstances. What we can influence is our own competence, attitude, and the quality of the work we produce. Similarly, Musashi's stance that never be jealous encourages a stable self-regard that isn't dislodged by the achievements of others. By relinquishing jealousy, we are not forfeiting ambition. Rather, we choose to place that ambition in direct alignment with self-improvement rather than in competition for outside affirmation. Resentment is another powerful emotion that traps us in a loop of mental replays. Perhaps you feel slighted because someone took advantage of your kindness, or you harbor bitterness toward a person who once criticized your talent. The Stoic approach would caution that dwelling on this slight only prolongs your suffering. You cannot alter past events, nor can you force someone else to atone in the way you'd prefer. Instead, you can shift your perspective. Interpret the resentment as a sign that you need clearer boundaries or improved communication skills. Then move forward proactively, addressing what is truly under your control, your capacity to learn from the experience and maintain a balanced viewpoint about future encounters. Emotionally, it is crucial to understand that Stoic philosophy does not advocate suppressing feelings altogether, nor does Musashi suggest that we can simply flip a switch to eliminate jealousy or resentment. The real practice lies in not letting these emotions define our conduct. We can acknowledge them, reflect on their sources, and choose how to respond rather than being governed by them. This approach fosters a deeper emotional intelligence. We neither ignore our feelings nor become enslaved by them. Instead, we cultivate the self-awareness to let them pass like fleeting clouds. In a society saturated with immediate emotional triggers, social media, constant comparisons, the glamorization of lifestyles and advertising, this calm approach to jealousy, lust, and resentment becomes all the more pertinent. It's easy to slip into a cycle of bitterness or dissatisfaction when bombarded by images of what we lack. Stoicism and Musashi's code remind us that chasing ephemeral illusions of success or stewing in negativity leads us away from the stable sense of purpose that truly benefits our growth. By learning to approach these emotional pitfalls with composure, we save ourselves from the swirling vortex of negativity, freeing up mental resources for creative work, fulfilling relationships, and genuine kindness. One of the most radical teachings common to both Stoicism and Musashi's Dokodo is the injunction not to fear death, a reminder that our time is finite and that we should thus focus on what is most essential. Musashi's precept, "Do not fear death," parallels the Stoic notion of momentum mori. The awareness of mortality, paradoxically, can act as a catalyst for a more engaged and meaningful life. Rather than living in constant dread of life's end, acknowledging death as an eventual certainty can shock us into realizing how precious each day is and how trivial much of our daily worry might be. This perspective has profound implications for how we handle judgment from others. When you truly grasp that your days are limited, would you choose to spend them forever inhibited by external opinions? Stoicism's response is a resounding no, suggesting that many social anxieties are dwarfed by the stark reality that life itself is short and unpredictable. No amount of external validation can extend that clock. The time and energy we devote to agonizing over negative judgments or to seeking constant applause might be better invested in nurturing relationships, honing our craft, contributing to society, or simply finding solace in activities that nourish our souls. Looking at it from Musashi's angle, the samurai code demanded readiness for battle, where death was a routine possibility. This harsh environment cultivated a worldview that scorned superficial attachments. If tomorrow might never come, it becomes urgent to live sincerely today. The illusions of immortality that modern comfort can foster, where we believe we have ample time to postpone our heart's desires, give way to a more immediate, unwavering determination. Imagine how many dreams remain locked away in the minds of those who are too fearful of public failure or scorn to attempt them. Accepting death not as a grim conclusion, but as a natural part of life can loosen those constraints, prompting us to ask, if not now, when? When applied to everyday experiences, such reflection can spur action. If you are deliberating on whether to start a new business, share a piece of creative writing, or learn a new language, the fear of embarrassment often looms large. But considering the inevitability of mortality, is that fear truly worth your compliance? The Stoic approach would say that each choice we make resonates through the limited time we have. If judgment or disapproval arises, it will pass, just as we too shall pass from this life. Embracing that perspective often melts away the intimidation. None of this is to suggest a nihilistic or morose viewpoint. Rather, it invites a clearer form of living, unburdened by illusions. Marcus Aurelius wrote about how ephemeral both the critic and the criticized ultimately are, rendering the drama of social disapproval almost comical. By adopting this vantage point, where we measure the significance of external evaluations against the immensity and fragility of existence, we recalibrate priorities. We might reallocate energy away from worry and into the living of a life that resonates with our deepest convictions, thereby drawing nearer to the concept of a dream life that is genuinely ours. Having covered multiple facets of Stoicism and Musashi's approach, we can now focus on a more generalizable framework for personal transformation. Recall that the Stoics frequently highlighted the notion of consistent self-examination. Seneca, in his letters, recommended daily or near-daily reflections where we scrutinize our interactions, identify where we let negative emotions overtake us, and celebrate moments when we remained rooted in virtue despite provocation. Coupled with Musashi's insistence on solitary discipline, this method transforms philosophical idealism into a living practice. It is no small feat to shift from, say, needing to be liked by everyone to adopting a healthy indifference to external judgments. But consistent introspection ensures that we chart progress over time, even if in small increments. How, practically, might one integrate these teachings into a daily routine? One approach is the morning mindset exercise, a close relative of the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. Upon rising, you spend a few quiet minutes envisioning the day. You imagine potential conflicts, maybe a challenging conversation with a colleague, or a friend's request that might push your limits, and mentally prepare yourself to respond in a manner aligned with your core values. By anticipating these scenarios, you reduce the likelihood of being blindsided by them, thus increasing the chances you will act from principle rather than from reflex. Another approach is the evening review. Before sleeping, you revisit the day's events. Did you catch yourself over-explaining or conforming merely to avoid negative opinion? Did you keep your composure when criticized? Did you show kindness where it was needed or hold back out of resentment? This honest inventory fosters self-awareness. Patterns emerge. If you see that you repeatedly bend over backwards to stay in others' good graces, you gain impetus to re-examine your motivations. If you constantly yield to social pressure at the expense of your own needs, you can decide to practice boundary setting in future. Over days, weeks, and months, these small revelations accumulate into tangible growth. In synergy with these reflection practices, Musashi's notion of the path of the loner underscores the value of deliberate isolation. This does not mean cutting off society entirely, but dedicating times of solitude to deepen personal insight, refine skills, and cultivate independence from the crowd's influence. It might manifest in modern life as scheduled offline hours, periods of travel alone, or simple breaks from group settings, during which you can reaffirm your own priorities untainted by peer pressure. At the same time, you practice stoic resilience. If you enjoy these solitary choices but others call you antisocial, you are well prepared to accept their viewpoint without letting it disrupt your sense of self. Such systematic application of philosophical ideas is perhaps the greatest difference between a passing interest and a life truly shaped by these principles. Reading about Stoic calm or samurai detachment can be intellectually stimulating, but actual transformation comes from mindful repetition. Each instance in which you choose authenticity over conformity, reflection over reactivity, or acceptance over resentment, you inch closer to a horizon where fear of others' opinions has far less hold. In that sense, life itself becomes a kind of daily training ground, a perpetual opportunity to test and refine your stoic, samurai blend of approach. In exploring broader contexts, it's illuminating to note how these principles manifest in real-world success stories outside of purely philosophical or martial arts traditions. Many entrepreneurs, creators, and social innovators have, wittingly or unwittingly, adopted Stoic or Musashi-like mindsets to realize their visions. These individuals report that ignoring naysayers was not simply a rebellious act. It was often born of necessity. To pioneer new ideas requires pushing past the inertia of how things are done, and the fear of public disapproval can easily paralyze innovative thought. By focusing on the process, akin to Stoic emphasis on controlling one's own efforts, and by refusing to attach personal worth to the inevitable storms of criticism, they maintained enough clarity and momentum to change industries or societies. At the same time, we encounter those whose journeys highlight the damage from perpetually chasing acceptance. Jessica, for instance, who once took on social roles that mirrored everyone else's expectations but never her own sense of purpose, realized that her relationships lacked depth. These were built on her willingness to wear agreeable masks, smoothing away any edges that might cause disagreement. And so, ironically, she found herself feeling lonely in a crowded social life, unsure if anyone truly knew or liked the real her. Only once Jessica mustered the courage to reveal her authentic feelings, her passion for literature and environmental activism, did her connections shift. Some acquaintances fell away, clearly never having been genuine friends, but the ones who remained became anchors of real mutual respect and joy. She discovered that authenticity can filter out hollow relationships, leaving the space for profoundly nourishing ones. To connect these observations with Stoic and Samurai tenets is fairly straightforward. The friendships of virtue that Aristotle once described, a concept the Stoics also embraced, require honesty, reciprocity, and a shared commitment to growth. They're unlikely to flourish when one person is constantly hiding behind niceness. Musashi's code, too, implies that those unafraid of solitude will attract relationships based on genuine regard rather than convenience or social protocol. Such relationships hold up better under strain because they don't hinge on superficial roles. By showing our vulnerability, whether it be in sharing our genuine passions or in politely declining requests we cannot fulfill, we afford others the chance to meet us in our truth. This synergy of Stoic and Samurai-inspired living does not just improve relationships. It also often leads to mental clarity and improved productivity. Maya's story exemplifies how detachment from external praise opened up new avenues of creativity, enabling her to produce more compelling work. Sarah's courage in advocating her ideas resulted in beneficial innovation for her team, even if initial responses were mixed. Freed from the tyranny of other people's judgments, these individuals tapped into reserves of productivity that had previously been stifled by anxiety. Their experiences mirror a common thread. If you shield yourself from the turmoil of seeking universal acceptance, you preserve emotional and mental resources for tasks that genuinely matter to you. As we progress, it's essential to acknowledge that adopting these principles involves an ongoing dance between practice and reflection. There's no magic switch that eliminates the desire for approval or the sting of criticism, yet each time you do something because it aligns with your deeper values, rather than out of fear of disapproval, you reinforce the habits of authenticity and resilience. Over weeks and years, these small but intentional decisions accumulate into a life story defined by personal sovereignty, rather than a quiet dissatisfaction hidden behind perpetual niceness. Where does all of this lead us? We have now charted the conceptual link between Stoic philosophy, the code of Miyamoto Musashi, and the universal experiences of fear, approval-seeking, and the perils of over-niceness. Part 2 has deepened our view of why these traditions place such emphasis on turning inward, releasing attachments, and embracing the ephemeral nature of life's joys and sorrows. Both have given us ethical and pragmatic reasons to disengage from society's endless demands for compliance and to find the wellspring of self-worth within. Whether we call it virtue, as the Stoics did, or self-discipline, as Musashi might, the underlying premise remains the same. External praise or blame does not define who we are, unless we allow it to. Crucially, these perspectives are not about escapism. They neither advocate ignoring social relations nor promote a cynical stance where we dismiss communal needs. Rather, they suggest we cultivate a stronger sense of self, so that when we do engage with others, friends, family, co-workers, or clients, we do so from a place of genuine compassion, stable boundaries, and moral authenticity. This approach also fosters a more measured involvement with social structures, We participate actively, but we do not let the tides of public opinion buffet us off course. Thus, the alignment of Stoic and samurai thought becomes not just an esoteric curiosity from centuries past, but a roadmap to purposeful living in our digital, hyper-connected age. At its core, the message is as follows. The price of living your dream life, of being fully you and not a curated projection meant to satisfy others, can be steep. You risk encountering disapproval, losing fair-weather allies, or discovering that certain social circles you once identified with no longer align with your quest for honesty. Yet the reward is an unshakable sense of integrity and the exhilarating freedom to devote yourself to pursuits that ignite your passions. In letting go of the compulsion to please everyone, you open the door to connecting more intimately with those who genuinely resonate with your values. In losing the cheap applause, you gain the real applause that comes from a more meaningful corner of society. Or from none at all if you genuinely prefer the solitary road. Thus we conclude Part 2 with a reminder. None of these transformations happen overnight. Stoic exercises such as the morning and evening reflections, or Musashi-inspired minimalism and discipline, may take weeks, months, or even years to reshape entrenched habits of thinking and feeling. The journey is iterative, with progress sometimes marked only by subtle changes, less anxiety in social settings, increased courage in voicing your ideas, the ability to say no without guilt. Over time, though, these shifts accumulate into a powerful metamorphosis. You discover that the friction you once felt, caught between your desires and the world's judgments, has softened. In place of that friction, you find a stable, quietly determined sense of self. In Part 3, we will integrate everything we have learned and further examine how these insights guide us in navigating modern social structures and forging relationships that resonate with authenticity. We will look at how to shift from ephemeral niceness to sustainable kindness, how to remain open to critique without letting it define us, and how to chart the final steps toward a life that harmonizes both Stoic resilience and samurai resolve. Take a moment now to reflect on the precepts and stories we have explored. Ask yourself, which do you find most challenging to adopt, and which spark the greatest curiosity? This reflective pause sets the stage for our final exploration. As we embark on Part 3, our primary goal is to synthesize the philosophical underpinnings of both Stoicism and Miyamoto Musashi's Dokodo, translating them into practical strategies for a modern lifestyle that values authenticity over incessant people-pleasing. In many ways, this section will function as an operational manual, taking the core insights we have accumulated, like the Stoic distinction between what we can and cannot control, and Musashi's unyielding sense of purpose, and showing how they might appear in today's world of digital communications, rapid professional changes, and diverse social circles. The path we traverse here is not formulaic. Rather, it recognizes that individual circumstances and personal temperaments vary. Still, the essence remains uniform. We can choose to free ourselves from the shackles of others' perceptions, thereby reclaiming a sense of tranquility and self-determination. A sensible place to start is the notion of boundaries, an idea that threads through psychological self-help manuals as well as classical philosophy. From the Stoic viewpoint, boundaries represent the conscious decision to protect our mental state by not letting uncontrollable externalities infiltrate our well-being. Similarly, from Musashi's vantage point, boundaries can be interpreted as a code of conduct that sets the criteria for how much energy and time we devote to certain interactions or material enticements. Think of these boundaries as the protective fortress around your inner city, like ancient defenders who meticulously monitor who comes in and out of a walled city. You monitor which influences and obligations you permit to enter your mind and schedule. If the fortress is unguarded, you risk infiltration by illusions, manipulations, and demands that cloud your clarity. Implementing boundaries in everyday life can look like politely declining a social invite when your energy is drained, or systematically turning off notifications at certain hours to engage in meaningful solitude or family time. It can also involve clearly articulating to colleagues or friends when you have reached your limit, whether that pertains to workload, emotional labor, or financial assistance. Such no statements, calmly and kindly delivered, are often acts of kindness in disguise, not only kindness to yourself, but also a transparent communication to others about what they can realistically expect from you. This honesty prevents miscommunication and fosters relationships built upon respect, rather than silent martyrdom. As you begin to set these boundaries, the initial discomfort can be intense, especially if you have spent years or decades living by everyone else's metrics. Others might balk at your newfound forthrightness, or interpret your boundary setting as callousness. This is precisely where Stoic practices, such as reflection on what truly matters, can help. If your boundary is established in alignment with virtue, reason, and personal well-being, rather than from arbitrary egoism, there is no need to be shaken by someone's disapproval. Musashi's approach of unwavering focus further underscores that your path is yours, and while you do not need to be hostile or unfeeling, neither should you cede your quest to the fleeting approval of those who fail to honor your autonomy. Boundary setting is thus a foundational step in reclaiming authenticity. It guards against the slip back into over-niceness, where yes is a default response, even if it erodes your personal aspirations. Over time, it also helps you gravitate toward people who genuinely appreciate you. Those who remain resentful or resistant to your boundaries are likely those who have grown comfortable taking more from you than they return. For them, your willingness to bend might have been an easy resource. When you shift away from that dynamic, expect friction, and recall the Stoic wisdom that not all friction is bad if it leads to living more faithfully to your values. As boundaries solidify, the next evolution in applying Stoic and Samurai insights is learning to transform failure and criticism into growth. While we have touched on this theme, it merits deeper attention as it speaks directly to the heart of why we often cling to niceness and external validation. We dread the possibility of looking inept, misguided, or undeserving. From childhood, many of us are taught, whether overtly or subtly, that mistakes are humiliating, and as a result we become risk-averse or overly protective of our public persona. Stoic philosophy flips this narrative. Marcus Aurelius viewed mistakes as part of the natural human condition, urging us to respond to them as lessons rather than personal condemnations. If we err, we correct course. If we face criticism, we assess whether it is warranted, in which case we can learn from it, or unwarranted, in which case it should not disturb our tranquility. Epictetus similarly maintained that labeling an event as catastrophic is our own doing, not an inherent quality of the event. Musashi, hardened by duels and real-world mortal combats, recognized that each conflict, whether lost or won, contributed to refining technique and deepening strategic acumen. In other words, both traditions teach that setbacks are part of training, mental, spiritual, or martial. A modern parallel arises in corporate or creative environments. Sarah's story, for instance, illustrated how stepping beyond the fear of conflict or disapproval allowed her to propose bold ideas. If we look at large-scale innovation hubs, we see a pattern. Companies that encourage failing fast and actively seeking critique often outpace those that penalize every error. The reason is straightforward. Feedback, positive or negative, broadens insight. Hiding from feedback due to fear traps us in complacency. So too in personal growth. Every time we shield ourselves from potential rejection, we sidestep a lesson. Thus, a constructive practice is to reframe failure as information. If a personal project fails to gain traction, Stoics would ask, did you act with integrity and do your best? If so, you can release self-blame and glean lessons for next time. If not, your error is a prompt to refine your process. Either outcome fosters development. Parallelly, Musashi's ethic suggests that no single duel or creative attempt defines a warrior's overall mastery. Mastery emerges through thousands of iterations, many of them imperfect. Fear of public failure stifles the very experimentation that leads to success in the long run. Embracing this perspective can be a game changer for those who struggle with over-niceness stemming from fear of negative judgment. Once you invite the possibility of making errors and receiving critique, the imperative to be liked all the time lessens. You realize it is acceptable, maybe even beneficial, to experience a measure of conflict, disagreement, or negative feedback. While these experiences may be uncomfortable, they are also catalysts for self-discovery and refinement. In short, treating failure as a teacher rather than an adversary aligns seamlessly with Stoic detachment from external outcomes and with Musashi's relentless dedication to improvement. Hand in hand with the acceptance of failure comes an emphasis on cultivating genuine kindness instead of performative niceness. Having set boundaries and reoriented our relationship to external judgments, we can now revisit what it means to be kind in a healthy sense. Many people resist stepping away from over-niceness because they confuse it with moral goodness, but authentic kindness differs profoundly from unexamined people-pleasing. Authentic kindness flows from empathy, respect, and a desire to uplift others, without betraying oneself. Philosophically, Aristotle's concept of the golden mean is helpful here. He proposed that virtue often lies between two extremes. If cruelty is one extreme and self-effacement is another, the golden mean might be compassionate self-respect, an equilibrium that honors both your well-being and that of others. This is reminiscent of Stoic virtue ethics, which prioritize actions that uphold wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. A Stoic can be warm and compassionate, but also firm and discerning, ensuring that their benevolence doesn't devolve into manipulation or exploitation. Musashi, too, recognized the moral dimension of leadership and humility. Though often solitary, he never implied that one must be unkind or uncaring. Instead, his code suggests avoiding unnecessary entanglements or illusions, which ironically can free us to practice sincere acts of generosity in the right contexts. Translating this to ordinary life might mean carefully evaluating the reasons behind your kindness. If you find yourself habitually saying yes to tasks you secretly resent, it is worth examining whether you're doing so out of fear rather than altruism. Real kindness might sometimes say no when taking on another responsibility would overextend you, thereby providing clarity rather than false reassurance. It's a principle that, while simple in theory, challenges the beliefs many of us have inherited about the obligations of good people. Another key element of authentic kindness is reciprocity. In Stoic or Musashi-influenced relationships, both parties ideally respect each other's boundaries, embracing an exchange of support that doesn't exploit vulnerabilities. For instance, if a friend continually demands emotional labor without reciprocating, Stoic reasoning might help you see that maintaining such a friendship blindly is a form of self-harm. With compassion, you could attempt to communicate your concerns. If they persist in taking without giving, you might withdraw from the relationship or set firmer boundaries, recognizing that your emotional resources are finite. Such a move can be labeled unkind by those who benefit from your over-niceness, but from the vantage of Stoic virtue, or Musashi's disciplined authenticity, it is a necessary act of self-preservation and integrity. Ultimately, moving from performative niceness to genuine kindness is a reorientation of perspective. Instead of being governed by the question, "How can I ensure no one thinks poorly of me?" you begin to ask, "How can I be congruent with my values and still show care for others where it counts?" This reframing ushers in deeper, more truthful relationships. You will likely discover that genuine kindness, unburdened by the fear of disapproval, resonates with people who appreciate realness over polite facades. Where niceness might garner superficial applause, authenticity sows the seeds of long-term respect and mutual growth. Building upon this reorientation toward genuine kindness, it is also crucial to address the role of self-compassion in forging a balanced inner life. Over-niceness often stems from a belief that we must earn our sense of worth by pleasing others. Yet, if we adopt Stoic or Samurai insights, it becomes evident that we already possess inherent worth, and our main responsibility is to act in alignment with virtue and discipline. The notion of self-compassion complements these ideas by teaching us to treat ourselves with the same empathy and understanding that we'd readily extend to a friend in distress. Consider how self-compassion interacts with Stoic reflection. While Stoicism suggests maintaining a rational perspective on setbacks, self-compassion ensures we do not drift into harsh self-judgment. When we confront the moment of having said yes too often or having compromised ourselves to fit others' expectations, self-compassion helps us own the mistake without vilifying ourselves. Instead of adopting a punitive mentality, we offer ourselves understanding, recognizing that the desire to be accepted is a common human drive. This perspective fosters a gentler, yet still resolute, path to correction. I have erred, but I am not beyond growth. Buddhist thought, so helpful to Maya in her example, similarly underscores compassion as central to emotional liberation. The practice of loving kindness meditation, for instance, extends good wishes first to oneself and then outwardly to others. In a Stoic samurai framework, such a practice can buffer the more austere aspects of detachment by ensuring our hearts remain warm, open, and directed toward moral harmony. This combined approach is not contradictory. One can remain detached from external opinions, disciplined in daily life, and still be profoundly compassionate, both toward oneself and toward the struggles of other beings. Self-compassion also acts as a bulwark against the loneliness that might arise when we initially stop living for external praise. Some individuals find that as they step away from constant people-pleasing, they lose certain social networks or experience friction with friends who were more invested in the nice version of them. This transitional period can be painful, yet, approached with self-compassion, it becomes an opportunity for deeper self-acknowledge and for forging more authentic bonds. We remind ourselves that while letting go of superficial approval can be isolating at first, it also signals a step toward building relationships more aligned with who we actually are. Such an approach, combining Stoic and Samurai discipline with compassionate self-dignolu, fosters emotional resilience. In times of criticism or social tension, you can respond by neither resorting to defensive aggression nor collapsing into apologetic compliance. Instead, you might calmly acknowledge where you went wrong, if at all, remain unmoved by any needless negativity, and keep an open heart for constructive feedback. That balanced response, firm but caring, self-aware but not self-deprecating, epitomizes the synergy of these philosophical traditions. Over time, this synergy can transform every facet of life, from career and creative pursuits to how we handle conflict within friendships or familial relationships. No longer do we revolve around the axis of others' judgments. Instead, we orbit around a stable core of self-respect, moral clarity, and empathic concern. Having explored boundaries, reframed failure, developed authentic kindness, and anchored ourselves in self-compassion, the next step is to appreciate how these transformations ripple outward into the social fabric we are part of. As Jessica discovered in her college experience, relationships founded on forced agreeableness tend to be fragile. They may rest on a script that demands compliance rather than mutual understanding. Once you introduce authenticity, like voicing unpopular opinions or openly sharing personal passions, some relationships might crumble under the strain, but others will flourish more robustly than ever. Aristotle's concept of friendships of virtue, reintroduced earlier, fits seamlessly here. Such friendships thrive on an honest exchange of ideas, shared respect, and a desire to see each other grow. If we always conceal our real thoughts because of the fear that a friend might reject us, we rob the friendship of its potential depth. Conversely, when we trust the friend enough to speak candidly, we offer an opportunity for the relationship to evolve from superficial affection to profound support. Those who respond well to our honesty reveal themselves to be valuable companions, while those who react with hostility or condescension expose their inability to engage with the real person behind the pleasantries. This transformation also extends into professional or community settings. In workplaces, for instance, the Stoic samurai approach fosters healthy collaboration rather than forced consensus. People who align with these ideals become known for their principled stances, willingness to listen, and capacity to separate personal ego from shared objectives. They can give and receive constructive criticism more gracefully, leading to better team performance and innovation. The nice individual who never raises objections or new ideas might avoid conflict but also stifles progress. By contrast, those who have learned to handle conflict skillfully and without personal malice can help drive initiatives forward in more creative and purposeful ways. Likewise, broader community engagement benefits from such authenticity. Instead of pandering to popular sentiment, an individual anchored in these philosophies might champion changes that are initially unpopular yet crucially needed, whether it's an environmental regulation or a new cultural initiative. Stoicism encourages a wide-angle view that weighs the moral implications of actions over immediate public reaction. Musashi's discipline counters fickle emotional turbulence, allowing one to remain unwavering even in the face of disapproval. The blend, then, becomes an engine for responsible leadership. You can respectfully hear the crowd, but you do not blindly follow them when it contradicts deeply held ethical principles. Admittedly, all of this can demand a certain fortitude, particularly in times when social acceptance feels paramount. Adolescence, transitional career phases, or precarious social circumstances, that is, when the reflection exercises, solitary discipline, and mindful detachment from outcomes become indispensable. By consistently renewing our resolve to heed an internal moral compass, we adapt to a new baseline. No longer is the question, how do I remain universally liked, but rather, how do I remain true while still caring for others as best I can? This question arises repeatedly in Stoic writings and pulses through Musashi's reflective statements, guiding each practitioner to test and refine their sense of purpose amid human entanglements. As we integrate these philosophical lessons into daily life, it helps to address a potential misconception that living with Stoic or samurai discipline will eradicate all emotional turbulence. In truth, none of these thinkers promised a life devoid of emotional ups and downs. They simply provided tools to manage, contextualize, and not be dominated by these states. Thus, emotional surges, anger when insulted, anxiety before a big presentation may still occur. The difference is that you do not build your identity around these emotional waves, nor do you make them the reason to yield or compromise your values. The notion that you might still be stung by harsh words or a dismissive glance is normal. Humans are inherently social creatures, wired to notice acceptance or rejection in our environment. What changes is how swiftly you can recover your equilibrium. With Stoic reflection, you note the emotion, trace its cause, and decide that if it arises from something you cannot control, like another's capricious opinion, there is no need to be enslaved by it. If the impetus lies in your own actions, you can rectify the error without compounding the problem by dwelling in shame. Similarly, from Musashi's vantage point, an emotional jolt might signal a deficiency in your mental footwork, prompting you to improve your stance. When practiced consistently, these philosophical tools hone emotional resilience. Sarah, who once silenced her innovative ideas, now faces boardroom disagreements without internal meltdown. She may still feel a pang if someone disparages her, but she recognizes the difference between constructive critique and personal animosity. She knows how to redirect her attention toward refining her proposal instead of fueling negative self-talk. Maya too might occasionally feel anxious about her design presentations, but she's learned to treat that anxiety as fleeting mental chatter rather than an existential verdict. Having cultivated an internal anchor, these individuals experience short emotional flickers instead of day-long conflagrations that derail productivity. In relationships, too, we learn to handle tension or conflict without catastrophizing. If a friend criticizes us, we weigh that criticism in light of Stoic rational analysis. Is it aimed at helping us grow, or is it a projection of their own insecurities? By discerning this difference, we decide whether to adjust or to maintain our stance. No longer do we lash out or withdraw in a swirl of hurt feelings because we have fortified ourselves with perspective. The moral clarity gleaned from Stoic and Samurai teachings also shields us from turning into people-pleasers again when conflict arises. Instead, we can remain kind but unwavering, recognizing that preserving authenticity matters as much as preserving harmony. All these shifts are cumulative, with each daily instance of choosing authenticity over compliance, introspection over impulsiveness. You reinforce new neural pathways that make such responses more natural in the future. Over months or years, you might observe that your baseline anxiety about disapproval has significantly diminished, and that, in its stead, you have cultivated a quiet assurance that you can handle both triumphs and setbacks without being undone. This is, in many ways, the lived result of the training regimen that Stoicism and Samurai philosophy propose, a sense of personal sovereignty underpinned by emotional intelligence. Reaching the final summation of our exploration, we return to the central question posed at the very start. What is the cost of living your dream life free from excessive concern over others' opinions, and what do you stand to gain? The cost, as we have discovered, includes relinquishing illusions of universal admiration, weathering the friction that arises when you first start setting boundaries, and facing the internal shift of reorienting self-worth away from external validation. It can also mean dealing with the fallout of losing or revising relationships that hinged on your over-niceness. These changes, though potentially unsettling, are the very crucible in which genuine freedom is forged. What you gain in exchange is immeasurable. By weaving Stoicism and Musashi's code into your mindset, you achieve a sense of inner calm that is less vulnerable to the judgments and whims of peers, strangers, or even close relatives. You open space for creativity, resilience, and deeper empathy that does not come from a place of self-sacrifice or manipulation, but from a well-grounded desire to support the growth and well-being of others. Authenticity, in turn, draws into your life those individuals who resonate with who you truly are, rather than who you pretend to be. Ironically, many find that once the immediate crisis of asserting boundaries passes, the relationships that survive become stronger and more supportive. Furthermore, you align yourself with a lineage of thinkers and practitioners who have navigated the complexities of social existence for centuries. From Marcus Aurelius in the Roman Empire to Musashi in feudal Japan, we see that these teachings are not just theoretical musings, but lived realities, tested in courts, battlefields, daily conflicts, and personal hardships. They endured not because they guarantee universal approval, but because they provide an enduring sense of purpose and composure that outlasts the ephemeral storms of public opinion. Even in the contemporary world, figures who embody Stoic or samurai discipline often display impressive equanimity under pressure, and their contributions to society, from pioneering artworks to transformative leadership, stem from a freedom that only arises when we shrug off incessant self-consciousness. As you step away from this three-part reading, consider how these insights might become part of your own routine. Perhaps you revisit your reasons for being nice whenever you sense that resentful tension building within. Maybe you begin to see social media comments or professional critiques as passing remarks rather than decisive judgments on your character. Or you might organize daily reflection sessions to pinpoint and release attachments that weigh you down. However you proceed, keep in mind that it is natural to find the path challenging. Lifelong conditioning around niceness and conformism takes time to dismantle. Yet each incremental shift is significant, for it solidifies your resolve to live by principles anchored in authenticity rather than by the precarious pursuit of applause. Thus, our odyssey through Stoicism, Musashi's precepts, and the pitfalls of excessive niceness culminates in a perspective that underscores the seriousness of living truthfully. True kindness, real courage, and unwavering discipline form the backbone of the dream life many of us desire, but rarely dare to claim. That life is within your grasp, should you be willing to accept the short-term discomforts inherent in relinquishing the comfort of universal approval. Emboldened by centuries of wisdom, you can meet the challenge as your best self, a self shaped not by others' shifting reflections, but by the steady internal flame of purpose, integrity, and meaningful action. As the curtain falls on our exploration today, ask yourself, what if the key to unlocking your dream life was hidden within the courage to simply be yourself? The journey we've just taken together is proof that your authentic truth is more powerful than conformity, more liberating than approval. From the echoes of ancient Stoicism to the strategic solitude of samurai philosophy, you now hold the tools to conquer anxiety, crush self-doubt, and claim genuine fulfillment. The story doesn't end here, it's just beginning. Imagine a life where you no longer fear judgment, where self-respect is your greatest superpower, and where meaningful relationships flourish through honesty rather than pretense. I believe in this story, and I believe in you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Your voice matters, and it could inspire someone else's transformation. Until next time, stay authentic, stay brave, and keep writing your own epic adventure.